Welcome to Where Are They Now? I'm your host, Heather Lindstad, class of 1985, and today I'm joined by Melissa Consalvo from the class of 1999. Melissa, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me on Where Are They Now?
It is my pleasure.
Did you ever think that you'd be getting this call?
No, absolutely not. Was happy to get it though.
Yeah, well, wonderful. So you started off, you've always been in Chelmsford, right? I mean, so you've gone through the whole school system, and usually we just talk more or less about the high school experience, but some of your experiences, especially with horses, had to start at a young age. And so where did that really come from?
Oh man, I don't even know. Like I was obsessed with ponies when I was like a little girl. And, I used to cut out magazine articles and like want ad descriptions of horses and accost my poor parents about like, hey, this one is for sale. It's only $300. Like I knew what $300 was. Um, and then so eventually when I was 8, I was taken to my first riding lesson. And, I think that my folks were hoping we're going to get it out of our system. It's going to be fine. And then, sure enough, I was like, cool, when do I go again? When is the next time? Let's do it. And they were like, oh, crap,
Well, I've always been in sports, and that was one of the things for me. And again, it's just kind of the nature of Chelmsford, I guess. I thought I would like to ride horses, and I got to take lessons. And then we had a barn, a small barn in the back of our house, and I said, oh, Dad, can I get a horse? And he said, if you give up all your sports, Heather. So what was your time commitment? Like, it's a big commitment to, it's like playing a sport. Like, what was the time commitment at 8 and taking riding lessons and those kind of things?
Well, at first it was super easy, right? Because I went once a week and I counted down from like the second I left the farm until it was time to go to the farm again. Like I was counting down the days, hours, the minutes, right? But then eventually it was, okay, well, now we can do 2 lessons a week. Now we're leasing a pony and so on. So it wasn't until maybe I was like 10, right, was the first time that we actually owned our first horse. And then I was at the barn constantly. Like my parents probably never saw me again because I was either, and at that time too, I was starting to get into music. So I was either at some sort of a rehearsal or I was at the barn, in the irons, accosting this poor horse, like hanging off of it upside down, backwards, chasing it around. Like I was a wild kid.
Yeah. What was your first horse's name?
Holly.
Okay. So you convinced your parents, and you've got the whole music thing going. And so obviously you were pretty organized with your time and those kind of things. So when you started as a freshman at Chelmsford High, what was it like, hey, well, we don't have an equestrian team. I can do that. But was your niche or your thing getting into high school like, but I want to be a part of the music programming?
Well, it's really interesting that you ask, and I don't really know how this happened, but whenever I wasn't in school, I was doing horse things, and whenever I was doing school things, I reluctantly did class, but I was in music, right, was the rest of the time. And, from the second that you were allowed to have a violin in your hand, which was sometime when we were at Parker, and at the time was Parker Middle School.
Yep.
And then, hey, now you can do a wind instrument. The second that was available to me, I was picking up a saxophone. And then I think throughout that entire time, I was also doing some sort of chorus, like anything that was music related, I was in it at school. So it was either I was out of school, I was doing horse things, or I was in school doing music things.
Now, how did you find those passions? I mean, you kind of just said that about the horses, but was the music thing something that was family related, or how did that kind of, or was it because of just schooling and it mesmerized you, it sounds like?
So I'm going to have to give music credit, like pre-horse, right? Because ever since I was a baby, my parents like had pictures of me like dancing. And they thought, oh, she wants to be a dancer. So I went into like dance classes And I pitched a fit. I was like this obnoxious child. That wasn't what I was into. I was more into just the music part. And they caught on because I think sometime around like fourth grade or however old you are when that happens, third or fourth grade, I started to do nightly concerts off of my back deck. Right. Like, so I would just like randomly belt out some of my favorite songs. And my parents were like, oh, okay, we get it. Like, she wants to do like singing. So let's see what we can do with that.
Right. Yeah.
So they basically, like, I was just like this wild singing anomaly. And they were like, I think school has a violin for you to pick up instead of you just screaming at our neighbors.
So, what, I mean, you were ninth grade. Like, what was your first show, or what were you doing as a high school student?
So I was into literally everything from the second I hit the ground at CHS. I was in the marching band, so I would say probably the first thing that I did was band camp.
Yep.
My freshman year, because that starts in like August, and then I probably had some marching band show like within 30 seconds upon arrival,
Right.
like when school was actually in session. But I think even before I started CHS, I had met Carl Rondina, who was one of my mentors through my CHS years.
Yep.
And, he really kind of coached me into getting into the music department there. I also knew Mark Kerouac, who was the band director at the time. So I'd met him before getting into CHS. So I was able to get basically right on board into the band program as well.
So in the band, what was your instrument?
Oh, I played too many of them.
Oh, okay. So you don't have a favorite,
So
or do you have a favorite?
I just wanted to play them all, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I gravitated to the reeds, right? So I started with an alto sax, and that's what I played in marching band and in concert band. And then I wanted to play in jazz band as well, but jazz band didn't need an alto sax. So I said, well, what do you need? And they said, well, we could use a tenor sax. And I was like, done. So I got a tenor sax. I figured it was a different key, right? I figured out how to play that. And then I go to jazz band. And then I wanted to play an orchestra. Well, we don't need a tenor sax and we don't need an alto sax. So when I was like, well, what do you need? And they were like, well, we're really light on oboes. There's not one of them. And I was like, done, right? Like, that is a guaranteed spot. So I picked up oboe to play in orchestra.
Do you think these teachers, because they're really smart at Chelmsford High School, do you think that they were playing you and figured you would try anything that they needed you to do?
I don't know. I think maybe they were trying to call my bluff. Maybe,
right, yeah.
I don't know. Or they were just like, well, she can pick up a tenor sax pretty quick. Like, maybe she can pick up an oboe. And then, I went inside out and I learned how.
Now, was there anybody famous that you really, it sounds like you played everything, but was there anybody famous that you really kind of latched on to with your musical profession? Like just listening, like a constant?
Like, this is going to seem lame, but as far as like the concert side of things and like the instrumental side of things, I really latched on to Mozart. Specifically, the first time I heard Mozart Requiem was like an outer body experience for me. And I can thank, there was a movie called Amadeus that we watched in like music theory once. And this is Carl Rondina's music theory class in high school. And like when that happened, I was like, oh man. And then I became like more inspired. I started to get into like oboe lessons and doing recitals and playing on ensembles and whatnot right around that time. So I think that was like really inspirational. From the vocal side of things, I became like really into Ella Fitzgerald, and popular singer at the time was Diana Krall. And so that kind of led me into the path of like, the vocal jazz performance thing. That's what I ended up majoring in college. And I kind of went that path while I was at CHS as well.
Now, sometimes people say, if you're into the arts, music and stuff like that, there's people that don't really push you to continue, say, oh, you're going to make a future with this. But I'm guessing that Mr. Rondina was really one of those passionate people that said this this is something that you can do? Is that what kind of led you to
Yeah.
go to UMass and pursue it?
Well, first of all, I just want to validate you. Everybody was like, "Oh, you want to major in music, so you don't want to make any money?" Like, and that just kind of the sentiment at the time. And nobody at CHS said that, but like just other people outside
Correct.
of school. But Mr. Kerouac and Mr. Rondino were both very into, saying that I could have a future in it if I wanted, either in the performance aspect or in the educational aspect. And they really encouraged me to follow my dreams, and I appreciate that. But I think even outside of that, I, for some reason, never had any interest in doing anything except exactly what I wanted to do. So I think I was going to do it anyway.
Correct. Right. Regardless. Right.
Yeah.
So you went to UMass Amherst. Were you involved in their music and their band and those kind of things?
Oh, yeah. So I ended up graduating UMass Amherst with a degree in vocal jazz performance. And then when I started at UMass, I was part of the marching band. Now, UMass at that time, it was really tough to be in the music program and also in marching band. But I gave it a good go for a couple of years. Similarly, I was also in the orchestra. I played oboe. They had an a cappella group called 6 Minutes, and I was in that from freshman year on. Chamber choir, concert choir, like same exact scenario again.
Yeah. But in the meantime, where were you with the horses when you were at college?
Yeah. So really interesting question. So on the horse side of things, in the state of Massachusetts, when you turn 18, you can get a license to train, right? So I knew when I was 16, I was like, I have to apprentice, because you had to apprentice for a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of hours before you can get your license. So I started that before I was 18. The second I turned 18, I applied for my license. I got it. So from the second I was 18 until, I mean, even now I still hold that license. I was training horses. I was teaching riding lessons. I was managing horse farms and kind of like running my business in the background of all of that.
Now, was that in Chelmsford or you were out at Amherst?
So in Chelmsford, that's where I did my apprenticeship.
Yep.
Under a trainer called Laura McGovern. The farm actually no longer stands, but it's right off of Route 27.
Yep.
But anyways, yeah, I did most of that work while I was in Chelmsford, and then I continued it when I went to college.
But they didn't have an equestrian team or anything out there.
They did have an equestrian team, but so it's interesting when you understand horse sports. The sport that they did there wasn't my key sport.
Okay.
So I brought my own horse with me to school, and so I did my own riding and was able to do kind of like my own training thing aside from what was available at UMass.
So were you giving lessons while you were out there though too?
I mean, not as many, right?
Yeah.
Because I was also a full-time student, but yes.
Correct. Right. Wow. So when you have a horse or you're training or those kind of things, I mean, so you have to be at the barn every day, right? Is that?
It pretty much,
Yeah.
when you're full-time horse person, right, you're
Right.
working every single day, right? Like, and if you structure your business as such that you can actually take a day off, you're not actually taking a day off. You are catching up on bills. You are sourcing, where am I going to get my hay next month? Because I haven't really liked the last couple of shipments, right? Like that, it's a complete lifestyle.
Okay, so you have to answer this, and you probably, I don't know if you can. How does music and horses, like, how does it merge? Like, how did you make it, like, I've got these two unbelievable passions, and how do you make that merge?
So one is always sitting at the forefront, right? And I don't know if this is cool to say, you can always edit it later, but I had this amazing conducting professor in college. And he basically summed it up perfectly, and it has been the mantra for my life from here on out. And what he said was, he was a piano player. That was his instrument of choice, but he paid the bills by being a conductor. And the way that he described it, he said that piano was his mistress right? And conducting was his wife, right? So that's kind of the way that I have likened my like career journey going forward, right? Like one is always my mistress and one is my wife, or I suppose Mr. and husband.
Right.
But nevertheless, there's always one kind of passion that, like, you know, maybe doesn't pay the bills, or like maybe is a little bit more of a dream aspect, right? Where the other one is really steady. And that is music has been the thing that's kind of the dreamer
Yeah.
side. And then horses and the animal health, right? Because now I'm fully in that career. That is my husband.
But when did you make that decision, do you think?
You know, it's always flipped,
Okay.
right? Like very early in my career, I suppose I can actually come to a decision on this one. Early in my career, right? Like I was very sure that I was going to be a studio musician. I was, you know, I was going to Nashville to record. I did gigs like big ones at MGM and in Los Angeles and in Florida and whatnot. Made my commercial radio debut in 2002. You know, I was really hitting that side of it hard. Um, but you know, eventually, you know, I was not making any money at it. But every time I would come home, I would train horses. I would make just like armloads of money training horses, and then I would, you know, take that money and go back on the road and, you know, not make money recording and whatnot. And then I would come back to the horses, right? And what eventually started to happen was that I loved training horses. I loved teaching people. And it, you know, it got to be like, why am I doing this to myself? You know,
Right.
like I can always sing some other way or, you know, feed that passion and do something that I also really love that is a little bit more stable.
And is that why you pursued your degree at Northeastern to get your master's, or?
Yeah, so at the time I was at a farm in Westford, Mass, just really close to Chelmsford.
Yeah.
And that business, you know, it was growing, it was scaling, and, you know, I had like just a lot of clients. And the point of my going to get my master's is that I felt as though I needed to learn more. So it wasn't really to further my career, so to speak, but it was if I'm going to scale this business and really do it all the justice that it deserves, I need to know more about the business side of things. And that's how I ended up with my MBA.
Nice. Now, how did you
Mm-hmm.
make your way, and I'm going to guess you still have a horse, down to North Carolina?
Again, you can edit anything you want. So there was I'm going to call it a random recruiter call on a terrible day. So because I loved my job, right? And there was this one day. This is really kind of funny. We had a septic tank disaster at the farm. Where I had to end up going to town hall to find out information about my septic tank. And I was, you know, hitting the wall, just like, oh no, like septic tank issues. And this is the day that I got this random recruiter phone call from this company down in South Carolina that they needed somebody who was an expert in the equine industry that had an MBA and might I be looking? And in that weak moment, I said, yes, I'm absolutely looking.
You wanted to get
And
away from
that's
the septic, I guess
the
that.
septic tank issues. But anyways, so ultimately, it was actually really funny how that played out. The long story short is that the farm ended up changing hands, and so where my business was no longer. So I had already started the process of, you know, finding this job in South Carolina. So it was kind of kismet,
Yeah.
or I don't know, fate.
Well, it sounds like that you've had, since you were young, that kind of that open vision to see what the next step was and to gain something. So did you have horses that you had to move down to North Carolina or South Carolina, or?
So I kept one horse.
Okay. I was going to
His
say.
name is Index. I think I may have sent you some pictures of him. He's redheaded and wonderful. He's retired now, but yes, I brought him down with me so that I had at least that stability in my life.
Yeah. Now, is that a calming factor just to go ride, or is that not something that, or is that what it is?
So after so many years of training,
Yeah.
right, I sometimes can't get out of my own head, right? There's always a goal in mind. So what I've done the last 6 years is I call him my pet horse, taking my pet horse and saying, you have no agenda. You're doing this for the enjoyment of it. So I just allow myself to kind of enjoy like most people get to.
So, and how often would you ride then?
So I've just retired him. So
Yeah.
now I'm getting out, and we still like ride a little bit, but it's really casual now. So now I'm getting out like 3 or 4 days a week. But up until about 6 months ago, we were out there 5, 6 days a week.
Really?
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. I guess
Hmm.
that's like having a dog, right? That you got to take it out to walk and stuff like that. You just are riding your horse, right? Now, are you
Yeah,
still
I mean,
giving lessons or no?
oh no,
No.
I'm not doing lessons right now. No, my job in animal health, doing uh, brand managing, right?
Yeah.
Like that is really all encompassing, and it takes up a lot of my time. So I'm like devoted to my enjoyment of riding these days.
I like that. What about the music then? Now that you're tied up, I mean, you've given up kind of one of those things that you really like, right? You've got this job. Does it take away from your music?
I would say no. The thing that took away from music really recently was the COVID pandemic, right?
Right.
So prior to that, I was singing with the Charlotte Symphony. So that was really how I was, getting my music fix down here. But since then, obviously, a lot of things have changed. So coming soon, I'll be looking for a new outlet for my music side here in Charlotte.
Yeah. By the way, so let's go back though to the horse. Not only did you give lessons and
Yeah.
stuff but right, you were a coach too, and not a lot of
Mhm.
people think of like colleges and do they have equestrian teams and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
how different was your attitude when you were coaching compared to just teaching lessons, right? Because you were with
Uh,
Olympians and those kind of things. So talk to me a little
yeah.
bit about like that dynamic. Isn't that's a huge change?
Well, yeah, so let's talk about the college coaching because I think that was actually the most fun that I ever had working in the equine industry, like hands-on equine industry. So I coached the early years of Boston College equestrian team, and then I helped establish and coach the Bentley University equestrian team. Um, and the mindset is really different because these riders, they do not have the benefit of creating a relationship with a horse before they go in to compete. They basically take team horses that they draw randomly, and they don't get to know the horse at all until they step into the ring. So helping these riders learn that dynamic, like how to feel a horse out on the fly, how to trust in your skills and your feeling with a horse rather than any sort of like rapport that you can connect with a horse over time. So that was challenging and awesome, right? Because it also leveled the playing field. You can't have boatloads of money and buy yourself the best horses and the best trainers and all of that and then win, right? No, all of the riders have the same pool of horses, so it really does get to skill, and I loved that so much. And then, but you also asked me about the Olympian stuff. That actually ended up being something that I got to do working in brand management, right? So
Oh,
not,
okay. Right.
I didn't coach any of them. My gosh,
Oh, okay.
I got to meet a bunch of them. Yeah, so in working in brand management, right? Like they're basically influencers for some of the brands that I'm bringing to market or
Yep.
working on through that job.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I've been doing this. Where are they now? I don't know. We've been doing it for a long time. I think you're one of the most energetic Chelmsford High School alumni graduates that I've ever met. And I think that we'll probably have you back because you'll have changed something. I know it's going to be in music. I know it's going to be in horses. But we're going to have
Probably
to have
going to
you,
be the hair.
Yeah, we're going to have you come back because I know you'll have done something different. But I want to tell you, thank you so much for sharing your story and being here with me.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to have you back on Where Are They Now? So thank you very much, Melissa, for being with us.
All right. Well, hey, thank you. This has been great.
Thank you. And for everybody, thank you for joining me here on Where Are They Now? And we'll see you back for another show.